But what I will say is that gold has been wealth for 5,000 years. And when the most sophisticated, well-funded, well-informed conglomerate of bankers on the planet tell you that it's the only other tier one in the face of a dollar that seems to be fighting major headwinds, I think ultimately we want to be in gold. It's crazy to think that the year, which just started, is already a quarter over. It just keeps on rolling, doesn't it?
Almost a third here, boy. Couple weeks, we'll be at a third of the way through the year. It is hard to believe. In fact, our sense of timing, my wife and I talk about this frequently, since the beginning of COVID, with the lockdowns and everything that's happened and the travel bans and this sort of stuff, our sense of time is just messed up. It's like our watches stopped. I mean, daylight savings time never helps, but we're like in permanent stuck mode. So it's really difficult for us to have a good sense. Like I've heard you even say, over the past year, and realize, wait, it's been 2 years since we saw these premiums or whatever, that kind of thing. It's a disorienting time that we're living in. And based on a lot of the experts we've been interviewing, I'm afraid it's going to continue to be a disorienting time for the rest of this year, at least, with a lot of changes coming. I guess maybe before we plunge into some viewers' questions I've got queued up, if you want to maybe highlight what you would consider maybe the top one or two things that are disorienting for you that are happening right now.
Yeah, well, I mean, for me, disorienting is a lot of us are working from home, and what used to characterize the work week, the breaking up, the getting out of your house, going somewhere, having lunch with people, those things for a lot of us, for myself, have stopped for 2 years. And so, every day you're at home and you're working out of your home office, and it just kind of all runs together. I think to me, that's been the biggest factor in everything running together is the routine that used to be 5 days a week, getting in your car, driving to work, and having your daily routine stopped. And so it all just kind of melts together. Of course, in our industry and dealing with so much that continually is changing, there's just been so much stimulus at the same time since 2020, since we started doing these interviews, that the combination of not leaving the house and constantly being inundated with more and more and more stimulus has made the passage of time just fly by. And I don't know if it's a good thing or not, but it's somewhat disorienting, as you say. I can't believe how fast it's going, to be honest with you.
We have a bunch of viewers' questions that were submitted. We've actually got them. They've been coming in throughout the week saying, hey, when you talk to Andy, ask him this. When you talk to Andy, ask him this. So we've got some of these questions lined up. One of them came in from a viewer who says, if there's a large amount of above ground gold compared to silver, and we've talked about how silver gets typically consumed by industry, that sort of thing, what good is it going to be to own gold?
Well, look, to me, the distinguishing characteristic of when I tell everyone that I believe we want to be in gold, it's because gold was reclassified Tier 1. The Tier 1 reclassification of gold, to me, says exactly what the intentions are of the central planners. The huge acquisition of gold by central banks. One of your listeners corrected me in telling me last week that Germany started their repatriation of gold in 2013. I said 2017. I guess to clarify that, in 2017, they made a real big deal about it. The media did. And in 2017, the media talked about they were making a push to have all of their gold sent back, and were told that they wouldn't get it perhaps up till 2020. But that begun, in my mind anyway, at least in terms of me realizing that the central banks were massively accumulating. We talked about all the central bank accumulation prior to the 2019 reclassification of gold as Tier 1. And when you see the central bank reclassify gold as the only other Tier 1 reserve in the world next to U.S. dollars after 80 years of it being just dollars and treasuries, to me, that is central to what is coming next. And they gave just enough information. They sprinkled just enough in the way of breadcrumbs for guys like you and I to talk about this. But most people who are sophisticated in finance wouldn't know that tier one reclassification if it meant their life. And so I guess what I'm saying is, yes, the information came out, and yes, it is tier one, but no one knows about it. But the central banks continue to accumulate it. So, there are guys out there like Bixweir, who I have a tremendous amount of fondness and respect for, who believe that there is more gold out there than we are being told. And maybe he's right. Maybe there is gold in Chocolate Mountain. Maybe there is gold in the Grand Canyon, like he's talking about. I'm not going to debate it. But what I will say is that gold has been wealth for 5,000 years. And when the most sophisticated, well-funded, well-informed conglomerate of bankers on the planet tell you that it's the only other tier one in the face of a dollar that seems to be fighting major headwinds, I think ultimately we want to be in gold. But if the door closed on gold and you were left with a big pile of silver, I don't think you would really would be that awful. What is silver? It's a substitute for gold. I mean, it has more utility than gold. But right now that substitute is a 77-to-1 reflection. In geology says it's 7-to-1, where silver is 7 times more abundant than gold. It has always been 16-to-1 for thousands of years. Now it's 7-to-1, meaning it's depleted. The 77-to-1 price ratio is a function of manipulation on COMEX, which I truly believe will come to an end. So to answer the question, if you got stuck with silver, big deal. You're in a good position. Why do I feel you want to ultimately be in gold? And I don't even think about how many ounces are out there, because the amount of money that's been created globally over the last few years dwarfs all the gold out there 10 times over, no matter how much is out there. There's only been $5, $6, $7, $8 trillion worth of gold mined since Genesis, since the beginning of time. Pick a number. I mean, they've spent more than that in the past 2 years in this country alone. So there's not enough gold out there to make a massive difference. In fact, I was reading just the other day that when you take a look at what M1 has done, the M1 money supply, just to get a 30% coverage in the M1 money supply, the price of gold would need to be $23,000 an ounce. And if you wanted to get the 1980 peak of 55% coverage of M1, supposedly with the amount of gold that is held at Fort Knox, the 8,000 plus tons, gold would have to be $42,000 an ounce. So if they ever were going to reclassify gold as, or it has been reclassified, but peg it to a new system, to a new currency, in order to get a sufficient backing, even a 30% coverage. Now, I'm not saying it would be convertible, because de Gaulle of France proved that convertible currencies convert, but it will be pegged. And I think it will be denoted on a distributed ledger for the veracity of that gold being held, so we don't have to rely on politicians any longer. But that 30% coverage backing would put gold at $23,000 an ounce based upon the M1 money supply and the amount of ounces of gold held at Fort Knox. So I think gold will outperform people's expectations, and I think it would not have been reclassified tier one if the big players, the central planners, didn't realize that you need to peg it to something when the system breaks, or no one will ever drink that Kool-Aid again.
Yeah, and we're actually seeing current moves by Russia and China in that regards, and have for the past year or two as well. That it's like, if it's just a pet rock or a barbaric relic, then why is it that some of the largest geopolitical players in the world are in fact announcing moves in that direction? So exactly right.
It's just like the Fed telling us that inflation was transitory. It's like Bernanke saying that subprime crisis was contained. And it's just like the Fed today telling us that we've reached peak inflation. They told us that 3 weeks ago, and it continues to go higher. And if they were really serious about doing the things that they were doing, as we talked about before, why not do it now? Stop messing around with a quarter point, half point increase. Jack it up 400 basis points and see what happens. Start selling off your balance sheet today. Why wait another month? They're not serious. They're not going to do it. But when you talk about the potential, what could happen, I think the market may do it for them. And it's because they are losing face. They are losing credibility globally. And that's why you own gold, because when it does break and when there is an exodus from the dollar, that's when you're going to see the tier one status of gold really start to shine. And so in my mind's eye, here again, like a lot of the things that I talk about on your show about, like, for example, the habitual talking about lack of supply, it's not talking about today. It's what I see coming. If you want to be a decent business person, businessman or businesswoman, you better not just think about today. You're going to go out of business tomorrow. You need to think about tomorrow, next week, next month, and next year. You constantly got to be looking down the lanes and where you're going to go. And if you don't realize that the central bankers reclassify gold as tier one as being incredibly relevant, then I will never convince you that you need to own gold. But what silver represents, because of the anomaly in price between the two, at 77 to 1, yet it's coming out of the ground 11 times less than that at 7 to 1, that represents a generational opportunity. With a gun to my head, though, Dunnigan, I'm telling people, ultimately, if you have one choice and one choice only, it's gold. However, the pathway into getting more gold lies in silver at a 77 to 1 ratio. But if the door closed and you're stuck with a bunch of silver, so what? You're better off than everyone else stuck in fiat.